Welcome, everybody, to Perspective and Potential, where we explore fresh ways to view the world around us and unlock the powerful potential within each of us. I'm Abigail Strait, along with my co host and mother, Gwen Fund. We're here to explore with you in each episode through ideas, stories, and strategies that can help you grow, shift your perspective, and step into a fuller version of yourself. So, whether you're looking to make a big change or curious about small steps you can take today, we're here to inspire, encourage, and help you along the way. If you want to learn more about who we are, we have an introductory bio on our webpage. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive in and see where a new perspective might take you. So, today we're going to dive into the topic of becoming the master of your universe. Now, what exactly does it mean to say becoming the master of your universe?
Well, your universe is what you have the ability to do and to control. Most people don't realize that it ends mostly at your fingertips. Essentially, we're looking at the relationship between power versus control and influence.
Okay.
So let's look at those definitions because I think it's really important. Power, the simple definition of that is the ability to do something or to act in a particular way. Whereas control, that simple definition is to determine the behavior of something. Now, that control can come from either outside or from inside, whatever the thing is. Influence, however, is just the capacity to have an effect on something. So, when we understand these words in their most simple form, it helps us to form a correct perspective on where power and control actually come from. So the ability to do things, to have opinions, to become something, that really lies within ourselves. Through our own personal power, then we can have an influence and gain some leverage on forces outside ourselves. Outside ourselves, however, there are people and other forces that exert their power and influence to try to control us. Political stuff, social media, cultural things, natural forces of nature, and religious perspectives.
And it's interesting because you said they try to control us. And I think sometimes that intention to try to control us is either intentional or maybe there's not even intention there, but ultimately every day we're faced with these opportunities. And something that always comes to my mind in terms of the word reaction, I immediately think of how you have told me that reaction brings regret and response is our best path to resolution. And the reason that enters my mind so much is because I feel like every single day, every one of us is faced with these opportunities where we have an option to either react or respond, right? We go to work and we have interactions with our peers or supervisors or employees. We're at home and we have interactions with our partners, our children, our siblings, our parents. Every personal relationship, there's going to be these interactions where emotions are involved. And even on social media today, I feel like there's so many opportunities, and they're nicknamed keyboard warriors because they just get on, and how many of those comments are knee-jerk reactions. And just as an example, when I was just got home from a long day the other night, and I'd had a long day of work, and then I went to one of my children's athletic games, and I was just kind of tired. And my son came up to me and was asking a question, and I responded or reacted in a very short, curt, direct way. And he immediately assumed that he knew what I was intending to say and gave me an okay, 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 and just wanted to shut the interaction down. And I think, at that moment, I had to stop and realize that my reaction was really based off of things that were going on inside my own mind and things that had happened that day. And I had to pause and say, hey, you know what, bud? I'm sorry if that came off as if I was trying to shut down your question that you were asking, but I kind of shared with him some of the things that have gone on in the day. And I said, can we talk about this after I finish this, present task that I had in front of me? And then we were able to have a moment where I could be a little bit more careful and intentional in my response. And I think that just, like I said, this kind of opportunity happens over and over again every single day with whoever we're interacting with. It reminds me of Viktor Frankl and how he said between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom.
I love this quote because it clarifies where it is that we gain or lose our personal power. It is that small moment where we're stimulated by someone or something that we either choose to react to that and give our power away, or um, we take that moment and formulate our powerful response based on who it is that we want to be. To
I love
clarify,
that, who we
yeah,
want to be.
yeah. To clarify, I think we need to take a look at the biological aspect of what's happening just inside ourselves. Um, so when we get stimulated, uh, we have an emotional reaction. And the first thing our brain does is shut off our prefrontal cortex or our thinking brain.
It's funny you say that because I think probably what's happening when that part of our brain shuts off. Well, let me back up a little bit. When we have this kind of interaction where we hear something, right, the stimulus, and it angers us or frustrates us or whatever we're going to identify the emotion as, but we feel compelled, whatever that is. Sometimes we feel the compelled that we better stand up for ourselves. And I think it's important to note that we need to be intentional when we think about standing up for ourselves. So let me ask you, where do you think the confusion lies for us between standing up for yourself and putting others down in the process?
Well, I can think of an interaction that I had one time at church. I was, you know, instructed to give out these applications for the scouting program or whatever, and I was looking for a particular fella at church. I couldn't find him, so I found his wife, and so I walk up to her and I said, "Would you please give this to your husband to fill out?" And she looked at me and she said, "You witch? What makes you think I can't fill it out?" I was a bit rattled for a minute,
Right? Yeah.
you know. So I took that minute. I took a deep breath, and then my response to her was, in our family, we don't call each other names.
Wow.
And I just handed her the paper and I walked away. Well, later that day, she called me up and she apologized, and she was so sorry. But I think back on that now, and if I could tear that apart a little bit, my response really was nothing accusatory against her.
Hmm.
I was just responding to my world, the person I want to be, and the way that I live. Um,
Right.
and so, I tried, not to make it personal. Um,
So so our response in those situations with that stimulus, our response is not about the other person then. right? I mean, you're saying then the difference between standing up for yourself is recognizing where our universe extends, what's going on in it, and truly where it ends.
And how we want it to be, becoming that master of the kind of universe that that we want to live in. Um, and so, I mean, whether or not that was a normal thing in her world, I do not know. But I think I had every right to express that in my world, I just don't like that. In my
Right.
world, that doesn't have a place.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are times though when we perhaps need to step away. And when I say that, are we saying step away from the stimulus?
In many cases, yeah. So, like, when you realize that you are emotionally dysregulated, and by that, that's a clinical term. That means like you're just really so angry that you can't see straight right now, or you're feeling very hurt, or confused. And you're to the point where you feel like you're losing your personal power. um, you know, it's at that point that, all of us have the right to say, I need to step away from this conversation for a while.
Mhm.
Um, or I need 5 minutes. I need to go for a walk. Um, I need to do whatever I need to do so that I don't escalate the tension that's already happening between the stimulus and myself.
So, and that just goes right back to the Viktor Frankl quote then. Between stimulus and response, there's a space, right?
There's a space, and that space might be the space of a breath, or it might be the space of a half-hour walk. One time my husband got so mad at me that he jogged for an hour.
so so then what is, whether it's a jog for an hour or but whether it's, just a few deep breaths, what exactly is going on in our brain in that moment?
Okay, so biologically, I really think it helps us to understand that. Right in the center of our brain, we have this little thing called an amygdala. And it's a tiny little thing, but it's connected to our limbic system. It's connected to all our senses, and it is when it comes to your survival, the amygdala, they're extremely important. They automatically detect danger, and they also play a role in our behavior and emotional control and learning. Now, that amygdala, I like to call him, that part of us, our little guard dog. So its job is to keep us safe, and it is connected to all our senses and to detect possible danger. And then it barks at us through our emotions, either
Hmm.
fear or anxiety, stress, whatever it is. We're going to feel something when it feels like we are under some kind of danger. So, when we're stimulated there, then, like I said, it first thing it does is it shuts off our thinking brain, and there's a reason it does that. So, like, they can save us in real and present danger. Like if we're walking through the woods and we almost step on a snake. Well, our amygdala is going to just shut off our thinking brain, so we're not going to stand there and look at the snake and determine if it's poisonous or not, right? It
Right.
doesn't want us to take that much time. So it just yells through our whole body, snake, jump, right? And
Right.
so it has control of our behavior to a certain extent.
Hmm.
So, using our power to get out of the snake's way, it saves us, right? But
Right.
in essence, we're being influenced by that snake to get out of his way. And we are giving that snake the power to influence our behavior. However,
Mm.
in the world that we live in, we're being stimulated by political things, social things, personal stimuli, and there's nowhere to jump or escape the perceived dangers that we see in the world. When
Wow.
we're offended or we feel threatened in any way, our reactive tendency is to retaliate in kind or to submit. Now, either one of those things is going to cause heightened emotions within us. And so when we react, we're giving our power to control our universe to the stimulus,
But
whatever
that
that stimulus happens to be.
it's so instant though, right? Like what you're talking about, it's instant in our brain. And so how do we train ourselves to, I mean, yeah, I want my amygdala to just be firing on all cylinders if there's a snake in the woods. But when someone says something to me, that I might take offensively, how do I start to learn that self-control where I can find the space?
Okay, so I do have another story. When I was studying to become a counselor, a mental health counselor, and at the end of our schooling, we had to have internships, and
Hmm.
these internships would help us then to learn more about the actual role of a counselor. And so I had an internship, and I was working with youth in a facility, and I had a great relationship with my mentor there up until the end of one of the semesters. And at the end of each grading period, he had to fill out a form on me, and I had to fill out a form on my internship and the facility that I was doing that. Well, unfortunately, I gave him the wrong
No,
form.
no.
Yeah. And so he's looking at this form and it's asking if there's any unethical things that I've seen at my internship.
Right.
And he asked me, and I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. That's the wrong form. Here's your form." Well, that rang his bells, and he was very calm in that. But from that point on, they wouldn't let me be alone with any of the
Hmm.
young people, um, and they were. I mean, they were cold to me. All of a sudden, everything changed, and so in this instance, I was very, very fortunate
Right.
because I could sense that something wasn't right and something was coming.
Hmm.
And but I was really frustrated because if you get fired from an internship, it ruins your chances to become a counselor.
Wow.
And I knew this. So there was, a lot at stake in this whole thing. So I took I remember one night in particular, I didn't even sleep very well that night because I had all of this going around in my brain. I knew the impact and the importance of being able to complete my internship, but I also could sense that something was really, really wrong.
Hmm.
And so, as it turned out, it was just a couple of days later, we were in a staff meeting. And usually, those staff meetings, yeah, everybody is just nice and friendly and whatever. And I think they ask a question like, "Does anybody have any questions?" And I said, "Well, I do. I was told by one of the other staff members that I'm not allowed to be alone with any of the youth, and I'm just wondering why that is."
Right.
And the director, he just very hyped up and in a rage said, "Because you can't handle it."
Wow.
And so here I am in this staff meeting with like a dozen other people. And I realized, like I said, I'd already been thinking about this. I had not more than a moment, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But so I just sat there for a minute and I said, well, I think you're wrong.
Hmm.
I said, I've raised 8 wonderful children. I've been teaching youth for more than 10 years in different capacities. And I think I'm very qualified to handle these things with these children. All of a sudden, he quiets right down and the meeting ends. And I knew at that point that I needed to find another internship. But they were, everybody was cordial to me, but they still wouldn't let me, because I think they were afraid that I was going to, give them an unethical review in my form. And so it wasn't really even about me. It was about their fear.
It was their fear. And like we said earlier, their fear controlled their reactions, and yet your response in that situation was all about your universe and what you controlled. And so I think we can kind of see the paradox there. When you let something else externally control your emotions, right? I don't know that they had really any evidence to support that fear and why they reacted the way they did. But your response allowed you to retain that seat of power and control because you realized where your universe extended. I think
Right.
I think all of us can kind of relate to that in whatever capacity. I mean, especially in the professional realm too. I know there's many high stakes meetings that I'm a part of, and I'm in education, right? And so I've spent a lot of years with many different stakeholders in meetings. And sometimes in those high stake meetings, somebody else might be saying something um, about me directly. And their information is not always complete, right? But I think there's some argumentative tactics that naturally people seem to come by where they state something as fact, even if it's not. And in those moments, always try to take a deep breath and be very intentional in my response. And it is a skill that comes over time. Believe me, sometimes, I have allowed those emotions to get the better of me. And you're right, your thinking brain shuts off. But in learning to exercise some of that self control, I think over time, we just keep practicing it like any other skill, you know?
Exactly. Well, and so in counseling, there's this technique called reframing that helps with this whole concept.
Hmm.
So I didn't develop this technique, and I don't know who did, but I sure wish I could thank them because I've used it countless times with clients. If we can imagine the 4 corners of a picture frame, now that top left corner, we're going to label that the stimulus. And
Okay.
so when something stimulates us, then we go over to the top right corner and we're either going to have a reaction or a response. Because based on what we do at that corner, then go down to the bottom right corner and you're going to get a result. Something's going to happen based on the stimulus and the response that's made, whether it's reactionary or whatever it is. And then if you go back over to the bottom left corner, all of a sudden now there's a memory bank that is going to be in your mind the next time you're in the presence of that stimulus again. And so it's in that top right corner where um, we either retain or give away our power. So if we are reactionary, then we react, and then we then we have a result based on that reaction that we gave. And then it's that memory bank, and then we've got a vicious circle that's going on there. However, if we respond differently than what our emotional reaction is telling us, then we may end up with a different result, and then a different memory bank, and then a different reaction every time we're in the presence of the stimulus. And I want to go back here just to the story of the lady at church. And
Hmm.
later that day, she called me and she apologized. We were able to actually laugh about it and have a conversation. And so, consequently, a different memory bank. And the next time I saw her at church, there was no tension. There was just, kind of a bond actually that we shared because we'd had this interaction and this, yeah.
Well, you know what I think is interesting about that story that you share, and even you just sharing that part, is that this reframing technique, what keeps coming to my mind is it's cyclical. I mean, it's just constant. We have a stimulus. Maybe somebody called us a name at church. We have a reaction or a response, right? If we're going to kind of dissect those words and call them different things, but let's say, we have a good response. There's a result. And it doesn't, what's interesting is that's a result, not necessarily a resolution, right? But then there was a memory. That memory is hard pressed into your brain. But there's another one. There's another stimulus, right? I think you stimulated something within her that caused her to have a response. And that response was a phone call. And the result was you guys were able to repair the effects of that interaction, and it left another positive memory. And at the end of the day, if we can choose, if we can continually choose positive responses, then we're more likely, I'm not going to say all the time, but we're more likely to have positive results and therefore positive memories that will help us in the future. So, I mean, what is the potential to be gained from this new perspective?
Well, the greatest potential, of course, is that we're not relinquishing our power and control to other people or things around us. We stay in charge of our universe
Mm,
and our emotions.
right,
Um, there's a lot to be gained by taking that moment to respond with our thinking brain instead of letting ourselves react with a hyper emotion that is totally, uncontrolled.
right.
So,
You know, I have to ask this question because I just as adults, right? I think we're we're very aware as you get older, at least in my brain it makes sense that as we get older we do start to naturally become more aware of the things that trigger us, that that and how we respond or react. But can a child also learn this technique?
well, okay. Ultimately, I would say yes. Um, a child can learn it if taught with love and patience.
Mm,
Because we have to understand that the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed in any of us until early adulthood. And children, by far, well, I take this back. Because it's quite honestly that I would think most of us, even adults now, are not really in touch with our feelings. We have like a list of maybe a dozen feelings that we recognize and that we can name, right? And
right,
children definitely fall into that category that um, they don't they're not always able to name what they're feeling or thinking. However, they can learn this process, and if they're taught lovingly and with patience, they can learn to recognize when they're having an emotion, right? When
right.
they're emotionally reactive. And they can be taught the process to say, I'm really mad, mommy, and I need a minute, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
most of the time kids are pretty resilient and they just need to go get out of the stress and the tension of whatever is going on at the moment in school or at home. Um, but if those of us adults could master this, this could definitely be passed on to all the children in our life.
Well, and one thing I know about being in education is that teaching somebody, teaching a child this process as directly as we're speaking about it is not nearly as effective as modeling this behavior for them. And if they see it on repeat, they will start to understand inherently, they might understand the process before they even truly understand the step-by-step process. So, and
Absolutely.
I think what you touched on is a great topic in terms of our feelings for, our next episode as we kind of dive into some of that. So as we come to a close today, let's just kind of pinpoint the most crucial points from our talk and consider how they apply in our daily life.
Okay, well, first of all, let's go back to the definitions. Power comes from having the ability to do something or act in a particular way. And so, if you look at history, there have been a lot of dictators or, kings or whatever that have controlled people, but they really didn't have the power essentially to get inside those people's heads as far as making them want things or making them become things that they wanted them to be. So power is innate in us,
Mm-hmm.
and each of us have our own particular power, but we do need to understand that control is either going to come from inside or outside. And so we can learn self-control, we can learn how to be in control of our powers, and or we can also learn how we end up giving that power away.
And then we come to the reframing technique, right?
Yeah, so that is just something that's going to take practice, 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 and it sounds harder than it is. It's really a two-step um, process, I think. Realizing when you've been stimulated and taking that minute, that is the key right there, because if you do those two things, you're feeling stimulated and you recognize it and you take that minute or that walk or whatever it is, it's going to make all the difference in the world in the other two steps.
That's perfect. That's perfect. And I think that leaves us with something that, we can, starting tomorrow, just being aware of the stimulus, the stimuli around us, taking a moment to just find that space, recognizing, and then looking for a way for maybe how we can be more intentional in our response.
Yeah.
In our next episode, we're going to talk a little bit about feelings and offense, given versus taken. We'll go more in depth with the process of reframing, how to do it, looking at our options, and then retraining our amygdalas, our guard dogs. If you'd like to learn more about this podcast, be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Also, please engage with us by sharing your thoughts or requests for a topic on our website or through social media and help spread the conversation about perspective and potential. Your insights really do make our dialogue richer. We're Gwen and Abby, and you've been listening to Perspective and Potential. Until next time, keep exploring new perspectives and remember that every small change can lead to something big. Food for thought. Bon
Bon
appetit.
appetit.